Now, without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to our presenters, Beth Secchi and Caitlin Anderson.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin, for having us today. And thank you for all of the attendees for joining and those that are watching this later on. We are very excited to be here with you today. My name is Caitlin Anderson. I use she, her pronouns. And I have been working with the Center for Career Development for just about under 2 years at this point as the Career Readiness Program designer.
Okay, I had to make sure I was unmuted. Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Secchi, and I am one of the associate directors at the UConn Center for Development, also in STORS. And I've been at UConn since 2001 and always in the career space, though my role has evolved over the years. And I've been presenting to alumni for the last 4 or 5 years. And when you go on that link that Erin mentioned, you'll see some other great ones, and we'll talk about that later as well. So for our agenda today, and again, thank you so much for being here. We truly appreciate you giving your time to this topic. We are covering 8 key points as mentioned on the screen. We'll have some brief objectives. We're going to talk about actually a thing, right? You hear about the career change or shift, how we define that, why you may or may not be able to do that right now. We're going to connect the idea of what you studied in college to a full-time job, a career. Are they the same? Are they not? Do they need to be? And as we start to wrap up, we will also talk about networking. We'll share some success stories throughout the presentation, and lastly, help you come up with an action plan for next steps. So before I go to the next slide, I just want to really reinforce the idea, and we may mention this a few other times, to think about if you're going to look for a new job, are you making a career shift or career change? And the techniques that we suggest and your approach will vary based on if you are actually going into a different industry or maybe going into a similar industry, your transferable skills, etc. So we will go more into that as we go.
So during this presentation, we do have some learning objectives that we hope that you're going to be able to take away with that. So you'll be able to engage in aligning job responsibilities to career competencies. We're going to explore networking opportunities and ways to leverage LinkedIn, and also be able to structure an action plan that supports your career goals. Excuse me. We're not going to be giving like a step-by-step how-to on finding a job. Rather, it's more about recognizing that you can make a shift or change regardless of age with adequate preparation and an open mind to the different possibilities. So thinking about, would you consider adding different skill sets or experiences into your resume that resonate with a job of interest to you? We are going to be utilizing some activities during this on a platform called Lumio. So if you do want to use your device that you're currently on, you should be able to through a link that I'm going to put within the chat, as well as a QR code. So if you want to use a separate device to partake in the activity, you can do that. And what's very interesting is, when we were trying to get the webinar set up here, Amanda had put into the chat that, a reason for a career change. And that's what we're going to dive into first here. So using any device, the one that you're currently on, you can use the link that I'm about to pop into the chat here. Or if you want to use a smartphone or a tablet and scan the QR code, it will bring you to the same area. And the first thing that we want you to think about is, what are the reasons for considering changing jobs or careers? It could be your reason, it could be just a reason in general, but we kind of want to hear from you all of, what would be that reason for considering. So take about a minute or two, get yourself logged in. Of course, feel free if you want to pop into the chat. If you have any issues, I can try to help troubleshoot it. We have about 12 of you connected already. I'm also connecting on my device just to make sure it's working. Great, there's about 16 of you in there now. You can type up to 3 separate responses as well. So you can put them all 3 in the same response and then click send response. But you should be able to see other folks, what they're responding as well. And I am just going to kind of drag the screen over to my shared screen just so, if anybody is having any issues sending in their response, also to allow Beth to see some of the responses that are happening. So we're seeing money and personal fulfillment, not feeling fulfilled in a current role. So those actually kind of go together. So I'm going to kind of drag and start to group the responses. Forced early retirement, lack of opportunities, looking for better pay, not engaged with work. So again, those ones kind of go together. Changes of interest, looking to move into a new industry. That's great. New mom and seeking more of a fulfilling career with that flexibility. Change of culture at existing job. Learning something new. These are great. Lack of career advancement, opportunities. Thank you all for participating. These are wonderful. And just so you know that these are all anonymous, they're not tied back to you. So feel free to continue to add to this as you think about reasons. Maybe, it stems from something that somebody else has said, but it's a great way to kind of kick off, you know, why we're all attending this event, why Beth and I thought that this was an important presentation to put on for alumni. I'm going to go back to the presentation here. Again, that's still open if you want to, add any more thoughts to that for us to review. And it's just great to hear from alumni about, like what you're considering to, make a transition from one area to another. So these were kind of some reasons that we all thought between Beth and I were some reasons that could pop up. So we kind of categorized them in 2 different ones. One was organizational and one was personal. So being on the employer versus employee end. So to just go through a few, the challenge, I heard fulfillment happening in there. So maybe you want to do more, you aren't feeling fulfilled in the job. Or you want to do less. Maybe, it's overburdensome. Maybe you've lost some colleagues and you've had to take on their responsibilities without a title change, which could roll into the environment. Maybe, it's too toxic. It doesn't provide you that chance to fulfill yourself. Which management could be an issue within there. It could be a poor fit, it could be disorganized, it could be that they're absent because they have other priorities that they're being pulled towards. Salary or promotion, maybe you don't feel that it matches the job description that you currently hold or responsibilities that you've taken on. Maybe you hit the ceiling and you don't have any other ways to be promoted within that current company or industry. Benefits was another one that I saw there. So, they're not sufficient for, what you need. And also size of organization. Maybe you got a job first at a really large organization and now it's not a good fit for you. You rather go with something more smaller tailored or vice versa. So plenty of different ways that, the organizational barrier or reasons could take into account there. Some on the personal side that we saw, so it doesn't align with what your needs are on a personal basis, whether that's your culture and your values, family conflict, maybe your family is growing, family dynamics have changed. You're just ready for a pivot. You're ready for something new. You've found a new hobby or a new interest that excites you and makes you feel fulfilled, and you want to see how you can kind of go within that direction. Unemployed, you could be using that time to reevaluate where, you find your purposes, where you find that excitement, what gets you out of bed in the morning, which could be that side gig or hustle that you're looking to elaborate on. Where could this actually take you? It's something that brings you passion, and you're looking to see, how can you make this a full-time endeavor. So I think that, getting that excitement is what a lot of you had actually said in your responses. So we're going to switch over to a different poll. So still within that same link that I sent in the chat, I'll send it again in the chat just in case anybody has joined since then. And that's an easier way to go about doing that. So poll number 2 The question is, what is preventing you from making a job or career change? So let me go ahead and open that up for you all. So if you were still enrolled, that's fine. If you open back up your device, it should log you right back in or give you the option to log back in. You can scan the QR code again. You may have to hit the bottom arrow to navigate to the second slide. So there are like an up and down arrow. You may have to navigate to slide 2 if you're not seeing it pop up for yourself. We've got about 29 people in there. So again, if you want to scan the QR code that's on the screen or go to hellosmart.com, enter in the class ID number. All of your submissions are anonymous. So we just want to hear from you of what is preventing you from making a job or career change. All right, so I am going to drag over just the responses. If you are having any difficulty, I still want you to be able to see what others are saying so you can kind of connect on that level of, what is preventing you from making that change. A lot of fear of the unknown I'm seeing along there. We had another fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of it not working out. Some people are kind of ready to make that next change, which is really cool. New industry can't really understand how your skills translate to their positions. That's awesome. Um, Something that we're definitely going to talk about. Time out of the workplace, absolutely. Let's see other ones here. Lack of open positions. Let's see here. Not sure how to market my skills from previous employment to seem like a good candidate. Great, we'll definitely be discussing that. I'm able to work remotely in this position. Absolutely. Needing training or experience in the new fields. Yes, that can definitely create a barrier for some folks from kind of taking that next step. All right, lots of great ones. All right, so again, feel free to continue to add to this if you're wanting one that's in there. I am going to keep that poll open so you can refer back to it in the coming days. I don't anticipate making any changes to this activity. So, feel free to check back and see what others have said, especially for those that possibly aren't able to join the call today. I just want to be able to hear from everybody. So if you are watching the recording, you can probably still try it out at this point, which is great. So when Beth and I were talking about this, the barriers to change, again, they fell into 2 categories, organizational or personal. So, if you hold a current job, the income you have, you might have to take a pay cut to start. And that can be scary in itself when you have to provide for yourself, provide for others. But, you got to consider the possibilities from there. Could you make advancements quicker? Are there bonus options with a new position? What other benefits do they have that would potentially save you money? So just some things to consider for those that had said, the pay experience, the income, you don't think that it would be as beneficial to you in the long run. Location, that idea of hybrid work, remote work, whichever is the format that you would want to work in. You don't know if you'd be able to find that same scenario. Also location, would you have to move in order to be closer to that position of maybe it's your dream position but it's only offered in the city versus in more of a suburban setting. And then maybe you can't be promoted, so that's definitely an issue to consider as not being able to take that next step. Some personal ones were really the same ones as reasons for change too. Cultures and values, your family conflict, not knowing what the plan is. Having a fixed mindset is another one. So you're kind of stuck in one way of thinking. There were a bunch of responses about skills. So do I have to get extra certifications, licenses? You feel like you're not trained for a different position than the one that you're currently in. Or maybe your fear of how to update those materials to showcase the skills that you have and have it translate to a job shift or a job change that you're looking for. So just some questions to consider is kind of like, what is keeping you in the current role, but also what is it costing you to stay in that current role? So I would just consider those two as we move forward. I do want to pop into the chat here. Let me see if I can grab that link for you. Is where these barriers actually came from, and they came from the Harvard Business Review article that I just put into the chat. And there also has how to overcome them. So, feel free to save that article, kind of give you some confidence in moving forward past those barriers as we continue through our presentation. So in your next job, I want you to think about this bar graph, because this bar graph represents the top 5 attributes that current grads are seeking in their job. So right after they graduate, what are the 5 attributes? And job security would be that first one. We don't want to sign up for a job that we don't feel stable in. Both job specific skills and soft skills tied for that second place. Having, a collegial work environment. What does that company culture look like? So having friendly coworkers that are going to welcome you in, you feel supported, mentored, so on and so forth. And then a good benefits package. So a lot of those were kind of what you all had said in the reasons and in the barriers, very similar to one another. But in your next job, I want you to kind of think about, like, are these attributes that you'll be seeking? So some of you might be 1 or 2 years out from graduation, some of you 10 or more. So this might still be relevant for you as we look at our diverse audience that we have today. And also recognize what is important. It might shift over time. All right. So based off of other factors, as you go from year to year, what new priorities do you have developing? Thank you, Beth. I also saw that you put in the chat about growth and fixed mindset from before, just so those of you that might not have heard that terminology can look to that.
Okay, so we want to take a little pause on what we just did, the teaching kind of thing, give you a success story, right? We want to talk about someone who made a career change. So we have 3 stories coming up, and 2 of them we've chosen not to identify the people just for their privacy, etc. So I'm just going to use they to let you know, like they. So years ago, I met a colleague who runs a consulting firm now and truly educates companies and people about using LinkedIn to help them be more successful. And they originally were working at a global shipping company, and I met them after they had left the job when they started interviewing me in higher ed, because I work with students, and they first thought they wanted to be a career consultant for small colleges that didn't have good career offices, or even taking students privately who weren't getting support at their school, and she would give them that one-on-one attention. And as this individual started looking into it, they realized that that was an okay career path, but a better one was when they started teaching the students about LinkedIn. She found that the staff started hiring them, and it just evolved into this massive not massive, sorry, that's the wrong word. It went from cultivating relationships to a small company of 3, and now 15 years later has 11 people. So I was very impressed. Like I said, I've known this person now for about 15 years, and I didn't even realize that their company had quadrupled in size in about 10 years, which I think is pretty incredible. And I think their success largely is due to the ability that they recognized where there was a need. They had a pivot, right? They had an original idea. It did not yield what they thought. They didn't give up. They redirected, and then they capitalized on it and now have a flourishing business. So just want to give that little story just to say, we know it can be done. I'm sure people too. We're gonna have another activity in a little while where you'll see how many people we know who have done this kind of thing. Okay, so I'd like you to think for a moment now, some points to consider. So we've broken it up into 3 categories: past, present, and future, and I have some notes on each one. So I'd like you, when you think about your past, I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is, you know, how did you get here, right? And what was within your control and what wasn't? So during the pandemic, I had a few friends that their jobs were eliminated because the work they were doing was no longer possible to be done. That was completely out of their control. I stepped out after, when my eldest was around 2, I had worked a pretty demanding full-time job and I needed to pause. And so I left without another job lined up. And then I ultimately actually started working here part-time until I was able to convert it to full-time. That took about 3 years. And that was mostly by choice. So that was my decision to step away versus my friend who was laid off. So also when you think about the past, I want you to think about what brought you joy. So think of when you were a child. So how many of you, just, you don't have to raise your hand or, answer in chat, so to speak. But do you remember when you were 5 or 6 years old? What do you want to do when you grow up, right? You may have had an answer. Or someone said, oh, I see you like, you play with Legos. You should be an engineer. Or you play with dinosaurs. Are you going to be an archaeologist or a paleontologist? And the person just might have liked playing with dinosaurs, right? Because they're cool and they're fun. Over years, it could be, well, I like studying things in the past and I like puzzles, and maybe that would lend to a career. But the idea of the activity when you're young, dictating what you do later on, is not realistic. At the same time, I personally believe, this is not something even Caitlin and I discussed or, on the team, so to speak. I think we do start to show some of our strengths and our skills at a younger age, at some of them, and that may guide us sort of subconsciously as we continue on. We also want to make sure you're discerning hobbies from a career interest or skill set, whether it's in the past or the present. So some people do pursue a hobby and they convert it into a career. Caitlin mentioned passion earlier. If your passion project is something that you are so invested in, and you can make a go of it and you are able to do it, then sure. I know I really love reading and writing and editing, and I enjoy that very much in this job. And I also do, as a side gig, book reviews. I have learned though, because even though I love reading so much, by doing the book reviews as with a required deadline versus a choice, sometimes my enthusiasm isn't as great. So for me, I don't want to make a career change to go work in publishing because I think it would actually diminish my love of reading and editing. And in a future slide, we'll discuss self-assessment a bit more. When we think of your present state, we mentioned fixed mindset before. I really want you to ask yourself, do you have that growth or fixed mindset? In order to move forward, one needs to have more of a growth mindset. Are you open to change? What positive idea can come out of it? And I absolutely am not minimizing negative work experiences, places that are toxic. I 100% had one. And that's why I chose to go part-time at my next job, because it took me almost a year to recover from that environment. So I really get it when there's a toxic environment, toxic boss, etc. That said, that job, the last thing I did at that job opened the door for here. So I don't know that I'd want to repeat the experience truly. I also recognize that it did open the door for me. To move forward, then, want us to be able to take what could be happening and frame it in a way so your audience, your listener, is able to make that connection and see how to best work with you. And again, we're going to give you some ideas with that as you network, as you leverage your past and present experiences. Again, it's framing it in a way that is going to be seen as an asset for wherever you're headed. If you're headed to work for someone else, even if you're headed for yourself, because you might have to make a pitch to a bank for a loan or something like that. Then something to think about too is if you get stuck along the way, and of course that could happen. If you get stuck though, and you're not moving at all, it is important to recognize that whether consciously or unconsciously you're doing this, you are still making a decision, that you are making a decision not to move forward. And I know that's hard to hear and maybe hard to process, but indecisiveness in and of itself is actually a decision. And I know it can be paralyzing, and that's not the point of today's conversation. If that is you, you're going to turn to your support network and your resources to help you move forward. And again, we have some really good stuff at the end to share that with you. As you consider your future goals, you're going to ask yourself some hard questions. This came up in one of the 2 polls that Caitlin did about like educational training. You have to ask you, do you need it? In order to make a shift over, if I decided that I wanted to, let's say I did want to go into publishing, I would go back and take some editing classes and learn more about the industry before I tried to jump ship. Even though I edit student documents all the time, I know that's very different than editing, let's say, a novel. For the positions themselves, I'd like you to imagine a hexagon. Okay, so imagine, the 6 points, and there's 6 topics, one on each point. So the company name that you might be interested in working for, a job title that sounds interesting to you, what is the work that you'd be doing itself, what is the salary, what is the location, and I read out of order, so I lost my 6. Location, industry, company name, job title, work itself, and salary. When you're considering an opportunity, you need to prioritize those because it's not realistic to get all 6. Caitlin actually brought that up already. It's just not, you might be limited by location. So therefore, that is your number 1 priority, for example. You may not care about job title, but you look at the job description and that's what's so important to you. So you prioritize them, and then you can review those attributes that Caitlin mentioned on the previous slide, because those are subsets, right? If the work itself or the company is your number 1, then you're going to look at those attributes and talk about, okay, well, what is the work environment? How does it match my values? So it really is nicely intertwined. So I want you to think about, when you get up in the morning, do you have that pit in your stomach, like, oh, I have to go to work today? Or are you ready to engage and start your day? It is not realistic to 100% say, yay, it's a work day. Now, I'm a little weird, right? I really like my job, and I actually like Mondays because the whole week is open in front of me. People say I'm crazy because it's Monday. I'm like, no, because it's almost like that clean slate. But even in the 22 years I've been here, have I had those days where I've said, I just don't want to go to work today? Of course, right? So it's balancing. And as long as the good days are more than the bad days, then I start questioning, okay, what is it that's making you want to change? And if you can identify the cause, it will be easier then to move forward to something else. And as we mentioned at the beginning, really think about, are you making a career shift or a career change? And then because you approach them differently as far as who knows, who you talk to. When I started, I was in residence life, and then I shifted to student activities, and then I shifted to academic advising, and then I shifted to career. So I've had 4 career shifts versus the first person I spoke about and another person I'll speak about in a little bit who actually had career changes. So Caitlin, I'm ready for the next slide. So we put, as you know, in the title, your age is an asset. So we know some of you are less than 10 years out. We know some of you maybe a little more or a lot more. All of it is good. So when you were in college, your GPA may have been important to you when you were a student. Once you got out in the workplace, you probably recognized GPA just doesn't come up anymore, right? Some first jobs still ask for it, but the trend for that has diminished significantly. And Caitlin, you can remind me if I'm remembering the numbers wrong. In 2016, it was something like 75 to 82%, I think, were asking for GPAs, and now it's in the mid 30%. So, or they're asking, but it's not a priority. And that is a huge recognition that employers are saying, we understand and we actually prefer to assess people on their skills, not on their academic rigor or academic results, because I'm sure many of you know, sometimes someone does not thrive in the classroom, but they are the best employee you ever had, you ever worked with, you worked for. And employers are recognizing that. So again, your grades were important, but they're not the end all be all. Because you've been working for a while, potentially, I'm assuming again that most of you have a job right now that you're looking to change from. I want you to use that as an advantage. Your maturity, your experience, your know-how, that if you are onboarding, whether it's a change or shift, you know how to act in a work environment, right? That's one of the biggest complaints from employers, is that people straight out of college sometimes struggle with that quite a bit. Don't hear that so much with career changers. They tend to jump in, and within a few weeks, it's like they've always worked there. Like Caitlin said, she's only been here 2 years, but it feels a lot longer, and in a good way, Caitlin, right? Not in a bad way. So you're going to then think about all your skill sets. You're going to leverage what skills you develop through your experiences in your own, whether it's hobbies or at work, and match those to what is required of a new position you're seeking. What do you like about some of the positions you're looking at? And again, think of my colleague from Story One. They were in sales of a product. They're still in sales, but now it's service. They overlapped. They were to redirect. And on the next few slides, we'll put these ideas into action as we address competencies. And for the person who wrote about being a new mom, I have an idea as well for that, and I will speak to that in a little bit. So I mentioned competencies a few times, and Caitlin, we can go to the next slide. Our organization at the Career Center is part of a professional association called NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers. And NACE works with employers and colleges, just like their title says. And over the years, they've always asked employers, what are the top skills that you are seeking in a candidate and that your employees are showing? And in the 22 years I've been here, I noticed even before this happened, pat on the back, that the top like 3 or 4 consistently were there. And so about 8 years ago, Caitlin, does that seem about right? I know you're a little more in there, 7, 8 years ago. NACE officially said, these are the top 8. We consistently see these in the top 8. And as you can see on the screen, there's career and self-development, communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology. And each one has a definition, and we'll put a link in the chat to the Career Center's Becoming Career Ready page if someone wants to do a deeper dive into what those all are. The top 3 that employers have consistently been seeking, and they do rotate a little bit, but the top 3 have been communication, critical thinking, and teamwork. So I want you to think about what you do and how those might be a strength, and then how do you present that in your resume or CV, in the interview, etc. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more, and especially when we get to the action plan ideas. So we have an activity for you, but you don't have to enter anything. I'm going to see how well you can start to identify career competencies in a couple job descriptions. So we can go to the first one. So just take a quick glance at this. We're going to not keep on the slide very often. I'm very long. I'd like you to look at the bottom, which lists out those 8 competencies again, and just start to skim the software developer role and see if you see any of the actual words or synonyms. So for example, critical thinking is not specifically stated critical thinking on this job description, but in a moment, we're going to show you a new slide and we'll show it. Someone said, yes, job descriptions, you're right. In the tech industry, they are marked going to be listed, which is why we have a second one that is not in the tech industry. Because we recognize some of you are in paths that are very like career directed, engineering, accounting, teaching, right? It is very, but especially if you are a liberal arts major, it's a little bit broader, or if you're a nonprofit, some of the other fields are more vague. So Caitlin, we can go to the next slide. So in this software developer role, you can see where we color coded, and the dark green is the critical thinking. And right at the top, looking at problems through an operational lens. Or if we see teamwork, let's see, they actually mentioned the word team. Well, they use collaborate and they use the word team. Also for orange under communication at the very end, it says deliver constructive feedback. Again, it doesn't say what form of communication, but we know that is communication. So they are there. And what you'd want to do is again, think of your current role or roles, most recent roles, what skills truly are highlighted in the role you're doing. And then you would craft that information into your application packet to, again, get brought in, because the whole purpose of submitting a resume when you apply for a job is to get an interview. Caitlin, we can go to the next slide. So this one is just another way of, unlike the one which was color-coded, we also wanted to have one where we specifically broke it down and it's easy to see. And afterwards, you are getting a PDF of the presentation, plus you'll have a link to the live version. So you'll be able to stop, start, and move on. So Caitlin is going to speak to job number 2.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. So just take a moment, maybe pick one of the bullet points. This is for a community organizer position. So just choose one of the bullet points. And if you feel comfortable tossing in the chat, which of the 8, and it could be multiple, are addressed in that bullet point, just to kind of get a grand, idea of what skills are being requested of this candidate. So again, just choose one bullet point and see if you can find any of these competencies. Great, yes, communication, teamwork. Oh, I'm sorry, on the bottom it does say equity and inclusion and technology as the bottom 2. Last bullet has equity and inclusion within there. critical thinking. Great. Teamwork is also in the last bullet point. Identify is at a critical thinking skill. Perfect. Well, thank you for all of those that have participated or those that were, kind of working along with this. So I'm going to show you the color-coded version of it, just to see kind of in everything together. If we put all bullet points together, practically every single one of these 8 competencies is appearing. You may have had different competencies listed than the ones that we have here, because you might be taking from a different perspective, and that's great. That's totally okay. That's actually what we're wanting to look for, because sometimes it's in the context of the work that you end up building a different skill. So although you might be communicating with others, you are also, promoting teamwork. If you're getting feedback, that's also helping you with professionalism and career and self-development. So there is a lot of crossover that happens with these competencies. So as you think that you're building one, there's also some competencies and skills in the background that are being developed as well. So again, just to kind of group them, not by color coding, so that you all can see the bullet points that fall within each one of the 8 competencies. One thing I do want to mention, some of you may have heard of ATS, which is called Applicant Tracking Systems, platforms like Workday, Oracle Talio, VidCruiter. ATS systems serve many functions, but are primarily used to scan candidates' resumes and highlight for the most qualified candidates. And this is based off of keywords found within the job description or keywords that they've identified they want the candidate to articulate. So they can also be experiences, it could be location, so on and so forth. So the way that you write and format your resume can have a big impact on how successful your resume will be through processing through that the process of candidate screening. So that's one thing that I saw in the Q&A was kind of that disappointment of not hearing back from a company after you spend time kind of tailoring your resume and cover letter to that position. So be sure that you are using those specific keywords found within the job description. So if they're using the word collaboration, don't use teamwork in your resume, use collaboration instead, because they're kind of looking to pick up those specific criteria that the language that they use versus the language that you would use. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we navigate through the presentation. So that's why it's so important to align the materials that you're creating with the job that you are interested in applying for. A next step to be would go through your resume and your cover letter to see where you are making or missing the connection with the skills that you possess. So take out a highlighter, use that color coding scheme that we just used on this presentation to see, okay, here's where I have communication skills listed, here's where it says communication skills, and am I using the same language that, they're looking for, so that way we can kind of beat ATS, if you would. So one more activity for you. So again, same platform that we were using before. I'll pop the link in the chat to make it easier to navigate to. And I'm going to open up a matching activity for you all. So let me navigate to you right now. I'll open that up. Excuse me. And just to kind of give you how to navigate this activity, especially if you're working on a smartphone or tablet, it's best to turn it sideways and use it in landscape mode, because then you can kind of do that pinch and drag technique to make the fonts larger. I know it's a little bit hard to see. I do have it up on the shared screen as well. So what you're going to do is there's an undergraduate degree that this person earned and their current job title. So you drag the tile down into the circle and then the current job title down into the circle, and the program itself will move those matches into the box. Once you have completed all 8 pairings, you're going to click on check current matches, and it will tell you which ones you got right or wrong. I will tell you that these are all first degree connections. These are all people that I personally know, and they are within 10 years of my age. So I'm 37, so up to 47, down to 27. So they're between those 2 ages. Just to give you kind of an idea from, when they earned that undergraduate degree. So take a few minutes. and try that out.
I do just want to note for everybody that because we started late, we will likely go past 1. So if you need to hop off, you will be shared the recording, but if you can stay on for a little while, we'd be happy to have you.
If you can't get into the activity itself, kind of the manipulative part of it, you think about just matching these as they are on the screen, which undergraduate degree goes with the current job title. I do see about 25 of you are in the process of matching them together. We'll just do about 1 more minute. I see most of you have completed at this step.
Thank you, Sully, for your honesty, and I hope I said your name right. When I practiced, I also had 0, just saying.
I did at least have 1 right. All right, I'm seeing anywhere between 1 and 2 right. Out of the 8, about 1 and 2 right. It's a little bit hard to decipher. I know. So if you're still completing it, feel free to keep going through. I am going to put it up on the shared Zoom screen. So if you really want to see how you do on it, don't look. But just what ones do match with which ones. Just to kind of, get the presentation moving here, because I know, again, we were supposed to end at 1 o'clock. So I appreciate those of you that are going to hang with us for, the remainder of the presentation, or as much as you can. But these are the actual correct matches. So again, some of you might be on another screen, so I'm not going to verbally share them at the moment. But I think that it's very, very telling that your undergraduate degree does not dictate job title. So that, I think, is a big thing you have to make sure that you're researching when you are looking for a career shift or a career change, is that the job title itself doesn't always lend itself to what your educational experience was. Or even if we had compared, like your first job title out of, undergrad or grad to your current job title, those might not match with each other either, because as you build skills and have experiences, you kind of shift avenues a little bit here and there, maybe for more specific concentrations, more grand, operations ideas. So I think that it's very, very interesting that when you look at these undergraduate degrees, it's very hard to decipher, what they're doing within their job, or the reverse of that their title isn't telling of the others. So I think that it's also important that Beth will talk about in a few moments about how do we find out what somebody, with a degree like yourself has and where it can take you. What do we know? So linking together with other folks and seeing, okay, what was the transgression that occurred with from graduation to where they currently are now. And again, all of these folks are, they're either cousins. One of them is my brother. There's a couple in here that are friends. One of them is me. To just give you a little FYI, if you can find that one. But I'll also let Beth kind of talk about our next story, to talk about their progression.
Thanks. So this individual, as you can see, graduated in, oh, you can't see, that's right, I didn't put their graduation date. So their undergrad, they graduated in 2017, and then they graduated grad school in 2020. And they wanted to work in higher ed, and that's what they did with their undergrad degree, as well as once they got their grad degree, they started working full time. And then we had a global pandemic. And this person went from a job that was in person, working with students, again, have been working with students directly for a number of years, to being 100% remote. As the pandemic risks, right, mitigated, the individual was requested to come back to have a presence on site. So it was a hybrid format. And they came to realize that, in fact, they really wanted to stay remote. They had some personal and professional reasons and decided remote was a much better fit. So they leveraged their skills, like it says in the middle, the tech skills, the curricular knowledge, etc. And I think sought out a job versus was headhunted, but sought out a job in industry in the healthcare field. So completely different than higher ed. I mean, a major career change, and has a job now as a senior strategic proposal writer in 2024. I don't know if that was the title that they first got, but 7 years from undergrad to now in this pretty cool position. So, you know, for this individual, the location, in this sense, remote, that was the most important priority, and everything else came to pass after deciding, yep, I need a new position and it needs to be remote. And then this is what it needs to offer, and so forth and so on. So again, just want to give you some positive stories. Networking obviously is a huge part of a career change, and it takes on so many different forms, and we're going to go into a little more detail about LinkedIn on the next slide. We've identified through our department 3 different types of networking: daily, event, and online, and they're defined on the right. So daily, you know, who are you interacting with? It doesn't have to be work interactions, just who are you interacting with regularly? Maybe do you go somewhere? Do you go out to dinner? Are you my husband is a football fan and he sports UConn football, yay! And he tailgates, right? So occasionally I'll go with him, and when I'm there, I might see someone. Actually, one time I ran into one of my former students there. It was pretty fun, and her kids, and it was just kind of cool to see her kids. So you just never know what events might lead to stuff. I was at dinner with some friends of ours, and their adult children joined us. And it turns out the wife, the adult daughter, is CEO of a company in Glastonbury. And I was like, let's talk internships. And she said, I'm on vacation, check in with me in a week. So I got put in my place a little bit, which was okay. But also then I've since followed up, right? So, you know, gauge your environment. I talk work all the time. So to me, I don't have boundaries, but I also need to recognize others do. And then lastly, let's talk about some online networking. The most common, I think, that you'll be familiar with is LinkedIn. Mentra is a tool for individuals who are neurodivergent. So there's some other techniques and resources there. And then there's also, when I was doing additional resource searching about true online networking opportunities, so many came up just for specific industries. So Caitlin and I are both part of NACE. We mentioned that, the professional association. A lot of my focus and my time at UConn has been on internships. So I'm in an internship professional association. Another colleague in the office who oversees resume writing is in a resume writing professional association. So again, there's some that are really narrow focused and some that are broad. At the end of the day, though, I want you to ask yourself, you know, what are you comfortable with when it comes to networking? Networking, honestly, is just a conversation. I think most people think it means take a business card, whether you're making it about yourself or you're using a company one that's been provided, and you go into a room of strangers and you're like, here's my card. Can you help me? Right. And that's not what it is at all. Right. It's a conversation. It's seeing how you can support each other. You'll want to create a term that you may have heard of is called an elevator pitch. a better way to describe it is a networking introduction, where you craft out a little bit about yourself, some of your skills, what you can offer, and then you follow up with an ask. Many, many people like to help. And if they can't, they'll let you know. But many people do like to help. And then when you end those conversations, the best question is, can you refer me to someone else? Can you suggest someone else I talk to? It really just continues to open your broad sphere. And I wish I could say I came up with that question myself, but I did not. I will give attributes at the end. We have a resource page, and there's a book called Design Your Life. And there's a second edition, a variation called Design Your Work Life. It came from there. Caitlin, we can go to the next slide. So LinkedIn, briefly going to mention LinkedIn. A different colleague and I did a pretty good deep dive about LinkedIn a couple of years ago, and it is on the alumni YouTube channel. And it talks about using your LinkedIn profile, like it says under branding, or using passively or actively. So for example, I mentioned I'm a big reader. So the banner on my LinkedIn profile after my head, right, the one behind me, is just a picture of books to show people I'm a reader. I know people who have side gigs, so they have their side hustle as their main banner because it doesn't interfere with their work. Other people are very interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and they might have a quote or they might have an idea that represents, that shows that. So that's that passive image branding. To be active, you can start answering people, make posts, comment, engaging with others. That's the more active. Caitlin earlier mentioned about job title. My title is associate director. That does not say one iota about the actual work that I do, which is why I have a secondary title in my areas of focus, which is internships, co-ops, and helping seniors prepare for life after graduation. Caitlin's title is a little bit more specific to her role. So you, again, think about how, so on my LinkedIn, mine just says career educator. I have a sub thing, but I don't have associate director on my header because, again, it doesn't make sense. Use LinkedIn to do research. You'll identify people, companies, organizations, people that you want to connect with. Groups are a phenomenal way to expand your network. Narrow down, again, that interest based on your skills, interest, value. I don't want you to cyber stalk people. I do want you to look up people who have jobs that you are interested in acquiring and look at their paths and see if there's any overlap. People sometimes write out the skills that they use. You can look up job descriptions that are posted in LinkedIn. Again, look at the responsibilities and the qualifications like we showed you earlier. It is not realistic to wake up today and say, I am starting a career change tomorrow, right? There are steps that have to be done. And so this is some of that subtle prep work. Lastly, you'll start connecting with people. We also want you to keep in mind that we recognize that you might have to do a confidential search. When I stepped away, I gave my boss an end date. We were moving. Absolutely not confidential. If I had started my search earlier, not a problem. But I'm sure there are many of you that are like, I really can't let them know I'm searching because I might get terminated, it will backfire, et cetera, et cetera. So when you use LinkedIn as a tool to talk to people you don't know, be very crafty is the wrong word, be very strategic in how you craft your networking introduction and your reason for the conversation, because you just don't know who you can trust at that point. Obviously, we hope you have a support system, and you'll hear more about that in a couple slides about people that you truly can trust. Caitlin is going to now give you her story.
Perfect. Thank you, Beth. So as I said before, I was one of the matches on the activity that we had done. My undergrad degree was in mathematics as well as education, specifically with a secondary concentration. And I also did my master's through the IBM program here at UConn through the NEAG School of Education, which was in curriculum and instruction. So previous to my role, as I said, I've been here for just under 2 years. I spent 12 plus years teaching secondary math. So high school math, algebra 2, I'm sure it's bringing back all the feels. But I was also National Honor Society advisor. I was what was called a team mentor, which is I mentored beginning teachers. So teachers that were in their first and second year, they have to complete a state-sponsored program. And I was also the supervisor for teacher candidates from NEAG School of Education, as well as from some teacher candidates from Eastern as well. So that was my previous experience And, as I worked through those 12 plus years, I started to feel that I wasn't being challenged as much. It was becoming second nature, and that's great. But I always told the teacher candidates that were doing their student teaching through me, that was that every year I wanted to be able to add something noteworthy to my resume. So, that's where the National Honor Society advisor came in, being a team mentor. And then there were also personal things that in there, having a family, buying a house, all of, great milestones that I had created for myself. But I just felt like I had become stagnant. And unless I was going to be going outside of my contract hours and get a stipend position, or go back and get, an what's called an O92 or O93 to become administration within a school district, I didn't feel that I had any more to give to help myself develop professionally. The other thing was a work-life balance. I have two young kids. I also found a really big passion for my side gig, which is creating decorated sugar cookies. So I wanted to be able to manage kind of the stresses of work a little bit better than my current that role that I was holding within secondary ed. So although I was never a faculty member in higher education, which I always thought that you had to be to work at a university, I did have classroom experience, a lot of classroom experience. I understood creating content for diverse audience. Created content for asynchronous learning, thanks to COVID, I guess, and worked with training the beginning teachers. So kind of like a train the trainee model. So I kind of started to take that into account, and I really did enjoy working with student teachers in that train the trainee concept, and thought about what were those skills that I possessed in order to make that one fulfilling, and two worthwhile to be able to continue to do day after day. Also, it just so happened that I'm an UConn alum, so that inspired me to, look at the University of Connecticut for employment. And every time I look back at my current job description, I can clearly see the skills that I had coming into this job, and also room for growth because I did yearn for that challenge. Talking logistically about my job search, and again, this is to me, it does not pertain to everybody, but I began looking at the end of May of 2022, and I was on leave from work at that point, just due to some medical reasons, but I didn't start applying until maybe the end of June. But from that time, from May to June, I did exactly what Beth was just talking about on LinkedIn. So I created a profile. I kind of stayed incognito a little bit. I joined groups. I joined organizations. There's ones out there for people that are making a career shift. And I got a lot of great information, do's and don'ts. I had somebody critique my resume so that way they could see I was going from, secondary ed into higher ed. Um, so I think that research really allowed me to tailor my job application materials to the positions that I was applying for. This was not the only position that I applied for. This was the only one at UConn that I applied for. I know, Beth, I know. And Beth was on my hiring committee, by the way. Um, so, but I feel comfortable in saying to those of you that are, putting their resumes out there and not hearing back, I feel that I really do because I mean, there were plenty of times that I was like, oh, I really, really hope that that comes, but when you look on LinkedIn and you see that there have been 400 applicants to that position and it's only been posted for 3 days, I can already kind of tell, all right, the likelihood of them actually getting to my resume, might not happen. So I had to, put my reality in check that although, it really looked like a job that would fit for me, I know that there are a lot of other qualified people out there that may have been in that industry and have that experience to bring forth where I was creating more of a shift. Um, so, I really want to talk about like how I used my previous experience to tailor it to this position. And it comes back to the wording. Look at that job description. I did small changes. I worked with students, I worked with adolescents, but a small change in word from students to learners, I think was huge because then that opened up the audience for who my skills could benefit. looking at, like creating reports. Report cards are a big thing in K to 12 education, but instead, outcomes is more of a business tactic. So when we talk about not only looking for the skills, also look for that specific language that is used within that job, because you want that hiring manager or committee to see that you are putting yourself in that role. And then therefore they can see you in that role as well. Um, as I said before, I did take a pay cut, but I will be honest, my take home with this job is more than at my previous job, and that's because of the benefits. So, consider that as well. I know that Beth, you had shared with me, and I hope that you don't mind me sharing, you had taken some pay cuts as well in your transitions from role to role. Don't see that as a barrier. Try to look for those alternatives. What is it doing for you? It might cost you here, but maybe in the long run it's going to help you, or maybe there's other things that helps to counter it and actually make it better. The other thing I considered was how quickly I could possibly advance. In K to 12 education, you're on a strict step by step, year by year. You could also have pay freezes based off of budget cuts. But within, role at the university, it's more sequential, and it can allow for better promotion than where I currently was. So that's kind of my shift that I experienced, and I hope that some of that could resonate with you all. And also thinking about like that action plan that does go along with it. So what are your priorities? I wanted challenge. I wanted a work-life balance. Identify your purpose is a big one. The very first question we asked today, a lot of you responded about fulfillment. What is your purpose? So I think those are some self-assessment questions that you can ask, and we do have some online tools at career.uconn.edu. UConn also has somebody that they partner with that I'll talk about in step number 2 that you can reach out to. Ikigai, I actually learned this from Beth, is a Japanese concept referring to something that gives a person a sense of purpose, a reason for living. In the US, it's been modernized with some Venn diagrams, kind of 4 circles for areas of life. One is what you love, the other is what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be paid for. And kind of at the center of those 4 circles overlapping is your ikigai. So it's your reason for getting up and shouting, yes, it's Monday, like Beth said, I'm ready to go, because you want to be able to focus your efforts to find that ultimate fulfillment. So I feel like this has kind of come full circle from that very first slide and activity that we did today, to help you all find your ikigai. Step 2, recognize your transferability, looking at those career competencies, identifying that your major and your role does not dictate the job title. So try putting in other things. I had started with, education, tutor, math consultant. And then as I did more research, I put in trainer, curriculum, curriculum development. I even went into some human resource because I knew I wanted to work with people and I wanted to help people, but more on the curriculum side. So it's preparing yourself to leverage those skill sets. You can work with a career coach. The UConn Foundation has that partnership with one who works with alumni if you want to start there. And we'll have a link to that at the end of the session that we'll provide to you. So writing down these ideas, documenting, and then transferring that into your resume. So yes, it is recommended that you tailor your resumes and cover letters. So it is time spent for those positions, but ultimately it will pay out. So you just kind of have to, hold on to that idea, and, not let disappointment get the better of you. I know that's easier said than done. Again, I've been there, but utilize that support system, and network. Even with folks on LinkedIn, how did you get there? What did you do? What did your process look like? Some will say it took them 3 weeks, others it will take 3 months, some will be 6 months, so on and so forth. So you can think about either SMART or PACT goal setting, and you can kind of Google those acronyms, but SMART goal setting is more for attainable goals and chunking it down into more specific and measurable tasks. PACT goal setting is more for like the longer term as well. But 2 ideas to kind of think about if you really want to lay out your action plan. And the final thing that we're going to talk today about is just mentorship and support. What do we have to offer you in terms of resources? So the first is our Career Champions program that I'm going to do a shameless plug on. But this is where we actually already have current alumni that have enrolled in the program that are wanting to talk with students and also alumni to be able to network with. So by enrolling as a career champion program, you're kind of saying that, you are invested as a community in becoming career ready. And looking to kind of promote that idea of competency development. So empower others with your story. So that way other students that are currently enrolled can hear from you that, here's the track that I took and here's where I got, here's my pivot, successes, different turns in the bend that you've taken, because the more they hear from you, the more they can identify, and it resonates with them in terms of how do I develop the skills to get where I want to be. The second one is career services for alumni. So through the Center for Career Development, we do support alumni. If you have graduated within the past 3 years, you have full career services. So up to 3 years post-graduation, contact our office and we can set you up with a career coach. After 3 years post-graduation, you are offered a 1-hour coaching session. So we can kind of line you up with tools, resources, strategies to help you out. But you also do have free access to the Career Center website. So career.uconn.edu. We have a resume and cover letter guide, which is brand new. It actually was launched this week. It's great. We have on-demand webinars talking to you about how to find alumni through LinkedIn to be able to network with, have informational interviews, and see kind of a day in the life of how did you get there, what's your career trajectory, and also interview prep tip sheets. Because going through that process over and over, you're constantly self-reflecting. So preparing on the front end will help you be able to reflect easier as you navigate through your interview preparations. So we will provide you, we've talked many times about this. This is a resource sheet that you all will have access to. You can scan the QR code and, take a screenshot of it on your phone. But the link is a PDF and all of these are linked to the specific websites. So the 3 I just talked about are within that first box. Beth mentioned some books, Design Your Life, Designing Your Work Life. There's also a fiction one called The Burnout. Picture Your Career was built through Vanderbilt University, so give them kudos for that. It's a great way to kind of set goals, list priorities, so that way you're kind of tracking through that SMART goal process a little bit that we had just talked about. There's also some articles and websites in there. I had actually just received, and it was very timely, the UConn magazine, and in the back of it, there was actually an article by a recent alum that did talk about 5 things I learned from reinventing my career, and that one was really cool. And then also some videos. There's the alumni YouTube channel, as well as we also have an alumni advice series through the Center for Career Development. So at this time, feel free to ask questions. We have the Q&A area, or you can pop them into the chat. We're actively monitoring those. Our contact information is up here. I'm also on LinkedIn. Beth is on LinkedIn. You can contact us through that way as well. But we hope today's presentation was valuable to you and gave you some strategies to help you navigate a career shift, a career change, or just kind of reframing your own narrative within the space that you currently have.
I don't see any questions coming in yet, but I will wait another moment. I want to thank all of you who were able to join us live today. Despite our technical difficulties, thank you for hopping on and joining to participate. I'm going to give it one more minute. If we don't have any other questions come in, I want to thank you all for joining us, and I want to thank Beth and Caitlin as well for sharing their expertise. Please be sure to check out the uconnalumni.com/events for more upcoming events similar to this, as well as other events in your area.
If I could just wrap up too, Erin.
Absolutely.
We know this was not a job search strategy session, right? And some of you may have I hope our description was clear, but some of you may come and say, oh, I thought they were going to tell us how to write a resume, how to update, how to interview. Those tools all are quite extensively on the career website. There's also, as I mentioned, other Elevate sessions that have been done earlier. So feel free to explore those and then reach out depending on where you are in the process, either to the team here at the Career Center or using Pro Tem Partners who affiliates with the alumni. And we gave you the link to the page. So either way, take advantage of us being here to support you as best we can. And truly, we hope that whether you're looking for a job next week, next month, next year, as someone put in here, good food for planning forward. Hopefully for all of you, it was that as well. So Erin, thanks for having Caitlin and me. We appreciate you tapping us as much as we appreciate, it goes both ways. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, everybody. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.